the war there and an escalation of same, there are some other hot spots of trouble on this planet that I think merit our attention and concern as well. And one of those spots is a place that, in my view, has been allowed to fade all too thoroughly and too quickly from the news, but which, as one investigative report has indicated, can well serve, as a matter of fact, as a mirror for Israel's possible future. The place well known to many of us, a region called Kosovo. Now, I understand it's legally part of the country of Serbia, under control of the UN, however, since 1999. And we remember the what I think was the egregious violation of national sovereignty and all of that was involved, but others disagreed, even in the U.S. government. U.S.-led forces of NATO mercilessly bombed that region in a battle with Serbian forces. And, of course, the Serbians were accused by NATO forces and those in the West who supported the operation of civilian killings and ethnic cleansing during a 2-year war with the separatist guerrillas, as they were called. Now, of great concern currently are efforts to form a separate Kosovo from Serbia. In fact, it's an issue that's been addressed by the Prime Minister of Serbia in the Washington Post recently. And joining us right now in the studios to help us understand the situation and what's really at stake is James R. Jatras. He's an attorney with Venable Law, a firm here in Washington, D.C., and he's also the authorized representative for Kosovo's Orthodox Christian Serbian community. Now, for many years, Jim was a policy analyst for the Republican leadership in the U.S. Senate. In fact, that's when he and I first began conversing, both on air and off. And before that, he served as a diplomat with the U.S. State Department. But he's kindly consented to come into our studios to talk about what I'm going to call, Jim, a crisis in Kosovo that hasn't made the front page news, I guess, huh?
That's right, Don, and it's a crisis that has been growing over the years since it dropped off the radar screen of most Americans, including perhaps many of your listeners, although you've been one of the rare exceptions to keep a focus on this region. And as we all know, when things happen in the dark, the things that result are usually not good. And I think there's a great follow-on to your earlier program with Victor Mordecai, because I think when we hear about the threat that Jihad terror presents, most Americans would have confidence that our government would have its white hats and black hats straight. We know who the good guys are. We know who the bad guys are. This is one area of the world where everything you think you know about U.S. policy is turned on its ear, whether we're talking about the threat of Jihad terror, whether we're talking about the persecution of a Christian community by radical Muslims, whether we're talking about drug trafficking or sex trafficking, trafficking in persons, sex slaves being shipped out to Europe through Kosovo. Everything where we should be on the side of combating those things, in fact, these things are going on under the nose of the UN administration and the NATO military control that exists there in Kosovo have not been going away. The Christian Serbian community that has been about 2/3 chased out of the region since the war in 1999 is now facing complete extinction if the next step on the plan to give Kosovo its independence, or rather more properly, forcibly and illegally detach it once and for all from Serbia, goes into effect. And that's what we have a full program on behalf of that community here in Washington this week. We appeal to the people that have come here, especially those who have come here in support of Israel this week, to also try to turn America's focus onto this terrible miscarriage of justice and this, I would say, woefully misguided policy that, if brought to fruition, would be a major shot in the arm for global jihad terror, for organized crime, and will be curtains for the Christian community in Kosovo.
We're going to come back to much more with Jim Jatras, and you can join us as we proceed with a question of your own that's to the point at 888. Jim Jatras is with me. He has served in our nation's government for a number of years, and we'll mention that again a little later. But right now he is carrying in his heart and on his shoulders a very serious responsibility regarding Kosovo and regarding the Serbian people. And Jim, take a moment. We'll get back to what this week is all about, especially here in Washington, D.C. and so forth. But give us a history lesson. Go back as far as you need to, even, I guess you'd say, back to World War II to get an understanding of this region and the vested interest that even the United States has there.
Well, somebody once said the tragedy of the Balkans is that it produces more history than can be consumed locally. Really, with Kosovo, you could go all the way back to 1389, really back to the Turkish conquest of the region, when Kosovo was all Serbian, when it was a land of churches and monasteries, when there were very few ethnic Albanians, and of course no Muslims, because the Turks hadn't conquered the place yet. That there then were several centuries of Islamic rule under the Turks, and that's when we had the migration of Albanian Muslims into the region and a consequent outflowing of the Serbian population, usually after unsuccessful revolts against Turkish rule. But finally, after regaining their independence in the 19th century, and then in 1912, the Serbs were able to liberate Kosovo, and at that time probably there were roughly equal numbers of Christian Serbs and Albanian Muslims in Kosovo. But unfortunately for the Serbian Christian community in Kosovo, there were other shifts in favor of the Albanians during World War II, when the Albanians had the patronage of the Axis powers, Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. And then after World War II, when Tito, the communist, would not allow Serbs who had been chased out of Kosovo during World War II to return to Kosovo. So if you look at, for example, the 1970s, 1980s, you can pull up on the internet many articles where at that time the ethnic mix was maybe 75-25 in favor of the Albanians. The Albanians ran everything. They were the special pet of the communist government, who hoped to appease their national demands at that time for control by basically letting them run the province. And you see the Serbs there couldn't get jobs, they had no police protection, and that more and more they were being forced to leave the province. This is where some of the focus back on, well, wasn't Milosevic a bad guy? Didn't he cause all of this? Is only partly true, because it is partly that history that led to Milosevic's rise to power, where for the first time in the history of what was then still communist Yugoslavia, the Serbs of Kosovo said, wait a minute, here's a guy who at least in part will stick up for us and protect us against this kind of violence from the Albanians in Kosovo. And then what happened was he didn't abolish, but reduced the autonomy that the region had had under Tito, and that gave the Albanians complete control. And this is something, of course, the Albanians reacted very negatively to. What that then led to in the mid-90s was an armed movement for Kosovo Albanian independence, for Muslim Albanian independence, what we call the Kosovo Liberation Army. In fact, there's a report from the Serbian government, post-Milosevic, after Milosevic, from 2003, you can find on the Serbian government website, that in 1995, in Tirana, Albania, two of the leaders of the KLA, Rabush Haradinaj and Hashim Taci, who are figures in good standing in Kosovo today, met with Osama bin Laden in Tirana, with the then president, now current president again, Sali Berisha of Albania, to plan the jihad in Kosovo. And their strategy was very clear. We will attack not only Serbian targets like police and military, we will also attack civilians. We will even assassinate Albanians who are, say, working as a postal carrier, working as a forest ranger, in order to terrorize them and radicalize the population. Classic terrorist strategy, and provoke a response. Not because they felt they could win a kind of war with Serbia, because they felt if they were able to stage a large enough atrocity, whether real or staged, that there would be an intervention on the side by NATO on their side after the Bosnia precedent, where we intervened in favor of the Muslims there. That worked like a charm. It worked, like clockwork. And in fact, some of the papers I issued from the policy committee analyzed this in great detail at that time, and this is the late 1990s now. That having all been said, what we ended up with was an international administration, UN and NATO in Kosovo, agreed to by the Serbian government, which continues today with the agreement of the Serbian government. And that agreement under UN Security Council Resolution 1244 defined Kosovo as a province of then Yugoslavia, now Serbia. It is legally part of Serbia, and there's nothing in that resolution that provides for independence for Kosovo. So now what is being put forward is essentially making Serbia an offer they can't refuse. You can have a negotiation, but we're going to tell you up front what the result of that negotiation has to be. It's independence. And if you won't agree to it, we'll impose it. And of course, that creates all sorts of problems. One is, it's illegal. There's no legal way to do that to a country. Two is, the Serbian government will not agree to that no matter what the threats and promises that are made. Thirdly, and we can go into this in greater detail, if you look at the history of the last 7 years of international administration, nobody has any doubts what the results of that will be for the remaining Serbian community in Kosovo. The burning of churches, the demolition of churches, the attacks on individual Serbian Christians, even some who have believed international promises to say, well, we want refugees to return here, and when they do, then somebody kills them. These go on. I mean, and the telltale signs of jihadism are unbelievable. You know, one thing we see, whether it's in Israel, or whether it's in Iraq, or whether it's in Chechnya, or whether it's in Kashmir, or Indonesia, is the beheading of victims by jihadist forces. It comes from a Quranic verse, smite the necks of the unbelievers. Our mutual friend Bob Spencer has done an excellent job in examining this on the jihadwatch.org site. And we see this in Kosovo. You can see this on the website for our effort, savekosovo.org. That's save, Kosovo.org. You can see KLA soldiers whose names and identities are known putting heads of their victims into a bag. These are pictures they themselves took. These are things they're proud of. And nothing's been done to them.